Christmas morning, bells ringing, lights glowing, the world wrapped in celebration. Yet at the heart of Vatican City, a different kind of silence filled the air, heavy, expectant, almost trembling. Thousands stood in St. Peter's Square, eyes fixed on one man dressed in white. Pope Leo stepped forward to deliver his very first Christmas address, and instead of festive cheer, he spoke of war, pain, and a plea that echoed far beyond the Vatican walls. A message aimed not at one nation, but at the leaders of a conflict shaking the world to its core. A message that some say could mark the beginning of something bigger, but this was only the beginning. The square was overflowing, banners waving, phones raised, a sea of faces waiting for words they hoped would bring comfort. Pope Leo stood beneath the grand balcony, framed by ancient stone and winter sky, his voice steady yet heavy with the weight of the world. The traditional by a message to the city and the world, but it didn't feel traditional at all. This wasn't just another blessing, it felt like a turning point. As the crowd quieted, you could almost feel the world watching presidents, soldiers, mothers praying for sons at war. Peace hung in the balance, and every word suddenly mattered. And what came next surprised everyone. Then, with a steady breath, Pope Leo addressed the war everyone fears may never end. No politics. No blame, just a plea direct and bold. He urged Russia and Ukraine to find the courage to finally sit at the same table and speak face to face, a call for dialogue, not destruction. He asked that the clamor of weapons cease, his voice echoing through the square and across television screens worldwide. For months, global powers have tried to negotiate from afar, but the two nations have avoided direct talks. And now the Pope was pushing them publicly to take that leap. Some saw it as hope, others a risky move, but one thing was clear: he wasn't afraid to say what many leaders hesitate to admit. But his message didn't end at Eastern Europe. His next words widened the lens to the entire world. Because for Pope Leo, Ukraine was only one wound on a bleeding planet. His tone shifted firm, mournful as he spoke of wars that rarely make headlines, conflicts that continue even after ceasefires are signed. He mentioned Thailand and Cambodia, neighbors tied by culture and history, yet still locked in deadly border clashes. He called on them to restore their ancient friendship, to remember what bound them long before lines on a map turned into walls. In that moment, it became clear this speech wasn't merely about one war. It was about a world growing numb to violence, a world where peace feels like a distant luxury. The Pope wasn't just wishing for harmony. He was warning us what happens when we stop believing it's possible. But then, his voice softened, and the next subject hit even deeper, touching the heart of one of today's most heartbreaking crises. And just as the world absorbed his words on Ukraine, Pope Leo turned his gaze toward Gaza, a place where tents replace homes, where winter rain becomes an enemy of its own. He spoke of families sleeping under tarps, of children shivering through cold nights, of entire neighborhoods erased by war. "How can we not think of the tents in Gaza?" he asked, his voice almost breaking. 2 years of conflict, entire streets reduced to sand and stone, millions displaced, humanitarians warn of hunger, disease, and trauma that could last a generation. Israel insists aid is flowing, hundreds of thousands of tents and supplies delivered, but agencies on the ground say it's far from enough. And caught between those claims are ordinary people, waiting, surviving, hoping. It wasn't politics he spoke of, it was pain. The kind of suffering the world scrolls past, until someone forces us to look again. His words pulled Gaza out of silence and back into the global conscience. But even then, Pope Leo wasn't finished. There was another tragedy he could not ignore. Hours earlier inside St. Peter's Basilica, Pope Leo spoke softly about those who rarely make news, not leaders, not soldiers, but the homeless, the displaced, the forgotten. He reminded the world that behind every war statistic is a face, a name, a family. Fragile is the flesh of defenseless populations. He said words that settled like frost across the hall. He talked of ruins left behind even after war's end, wounds that stay open long after ceasefires are signed. Broken cities, broken futures, broken people. Conflict isn't just fought on borders, it creeps into childhoods, into memories, into dinner tables that will never be full again. And that's what made this Christmas so different. It wasn't a celebration, it was a wake-up call, a reminder that peace is not just diplomacy, it's shelter for a child, warmth for an old man, hope for a mother who has lost everything. But his message didn't just move hearts, it stirred debate across the globe. Around the world, reaction came fast. Supporters called the speech brave, a necessary voice in a time when many leaders speak of victory more than peace. Online, clips spread across social feeds, and millions debated whether a single message could soften hardened politics. Some analysts believe the Pope's words might add pressure to ongoing peace discussions, especially as the U.S. works behind the scenes for an agreement. But critics question whether spiritual influence can truly move governments built on power and strategy. And yet, even they admit when the Pope speaks, headlines follow, conversations ignite, minds reconsider, and as his message echoed globally, one question began to rise louder than criticism, stronger than doubt. As the crowds finally dispersed and Christmas night folded into silence, one question lingered: can words stop a war? Pope Leo offered no promises, only hope, a call for courage, the kind that requires leaders to choose dialogue over destruction. Maybe peace is distant, maybe the world is tired, but hope, fragile as it is, still stands, and sometimes a single spark can light the path history has been waiting for. So tell me, do you believe a speech can change the world, or are we too far gone? Drop your thoughts in the comments.